The Game Awards is very much an event that everybody says does not matter, but at the same time, everybody's still watching, and very much those that work within the industry are there at the event. It's a time in which we all come together to celebrate gaming and also look into the future, in which usually there are some interesting announcements at the very least. This year's event, though, definitely was a highlight. It definitely had some big announcements that at the very least everybody is talking about, good or bad. The one thing I will say about this year's event is that it has the same hiccups as years past. What do I mean by that? The celebrity glazing just never ends. The advertisements, sometimes related to gaming, sometimes not, very much there as well. And then the awards. The awards are always an afterthought. That's why the reaction that has been coming afterwards is a little bit interesting. So, Game of the Year, it came down to 6 nominees. It was Astro Bot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring Shout of the Erdtree, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Metaphor. Those were the nominees. And there was already controversy with this because, one, a DLC is nominated. A lot of people don't understand why a DLC is being nominated and the fact that it was even under consideration, especially when there was other options that probably were a little bit more deserving, whether that be Silent Hill 2 Remake or Stellar Blade. And then there's also been controversy with Balatro, a poker roguelike game, that being nominated over some of those other games I just mentioned. So already to begin with, this was controversial and this was already being heavily debated. Then there was other outlets, media outlets, upset that Black Myth Wukong even got nominated. Now, the one thing I will say is that there really could have been a case made for any of these games. I don't think that there was a clear frontrunner this year at all. So I honestly thought that Astro Bot, if it started winning awards, it probably could end up winning Game of the Year, and that's actually what ended up happening. They won Game of the Year. Now, this is actually where things get really crazy. So again, while many individuals like yourself maybe, and many developers within this industry don't care about who wins and who loses at the Game Awards show, there's definitely some developers within this industry that take all of this to heart, and that very much seems to be the case with how the Black Myth Wukong team felt about the Game Awards and attending this event. And this is a recent clip coming from Alana Pierce. She was in attendance right next to the Black Myth Wukong team, and just to understand how passionate they felt about this, this is what she had to say in regards to the reaction to losing out on Game of the Year to Astro Bot.
And I was in the front row this year. It was my first time being in the front row. I was like, wow, thanks, Jeff. Great seats. But being in the front row means that you can see all of the actually important people. So like next to me was the whole Sony team. Frankly, that's probably why they put me there, was because when they gave me the seat, I was with Sony. So I was with the Sony publishing team. Behind me was Joseph Faris. Just behind him was Sam Lake, both of whom I know and am very fond of. They're both really great dudes. But I could see all of the nominees and awards winners, and the Black Myth Wukong team, I don't know which person on the team, was crying when Astro Bot got Game of the Year. Because you could see him just looking down the line, which is the first time I've ever seen anything like that, because generally everyone is like, Game Awards doesn't matter that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Wukong team were crying when they did not win, which is definitely unusual. Clearly meant a lot to them. They did an amazing thing. But I did find that surprising. Like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Did it look like celebratory crying? No. They were upset. Definitely upset that they didn't win. Which is also fair. But it was still just surprising is really all I'm saying.
Yeah, again, this just goes to show that some people coming into this event, especially they flew all the way from China, this meant a lot to them. This meant actual legitimacy. And say what you will about the Chinese gaming market, but it has been kind of just an afterthought, especially with a lot of the mobile slop that has been coming out of that market for so long. This was the first, heavy-hitting, single-player premiere experience. It was a big moment, and I can understand why the Black Myth Wukong team were dreaming about taking home honors at what they view as the premiere event for Game Awards. And yeah, some of the reactions, again, get a effing grip. I don't view it that way. They're passionate. They really wanted this award. And I guess I can understand how some people in attendance were like, oh, why are they reacting like that? But again, it's just some developers are really passionate about this stuff. I guess I just view this as a moment not to mock them, pretty much. But this ordeal very much continues because, as reported by MP First, Black Myth Wukong studio CEO wrote Game of the Year acceptance speech 2 years ago, questioned selection criteria of the Game Awards. So yes, the Black Myth Wukong CEO, the boss, very much is calling the process into question. This report goes on to mention that, I believe this is on Chinese social media, the Game Awards this year coincided with a major update for Black Myth Wukong. This is again coming from the company's CEO. For me personally, this project that spanned 7 years has officially come to an end. The 4 nominations Best Action Game, Best Art Direction, Best Game Direction, and Game of the Year were a first for a Chinese game. Ultimately, we took home Best Action Game and Player's Voice. Especially winning Player's Voice was gratifying. And this was a monumental success, say what you will, for the Black Myth Wukong. You know, their launch and everything. 2 million players at launch, that's just insane, and that shows the interest. And I get it, I understand a lot of people are going to say it's just from China a lot of those players came from, but there was still about 200,000-300,000 in the West and East and other places outside of China that were there day one. That is a massive launch for a single-player adventure game like this, and it was a big moment for the Chinese market within this industry. A breakout moment, you could argue. And they did, in fact, take home some hardware. Best Action Game, this is again...
Wukong. 非常荣幸能够获得这个奖项。
Thank you, everyone. We are deeply honored to receive these awards. A heartfelt thanks to every player. It's you who brought the tale of wisdom and courage rooted in Eastern mythology to life on this stage. And of course, sincere gratitude to the Game Awards for not placing any invisible walls on my way up here. This award belongs to every single member of our team, as well as our family and friends who have supported us behind the scene. Without you, I'd be like sitting at home testing the boss rush mode and buffing Erlang instead of standing here representing our team. Lastly, I want to say this. Our game isn't hard at all. It's perfect for players new to action games. Trust me on this. Thank you.
Yeah, and like I said, there's squealing within that's the audio of the Game Awards for those watching and weren't watching live. It was annoying, but I will just say that this was a very important moment for them, and I think that they maybe assumed that after winning some of these awards, Best Action Game, Player's Voice, that maybe this was an indication that they were going to go on to win Game of the Year, and obviously that's not what happened. But the CEO's remarks goes on to mention that yet, I must admit, there's a sense of loss and regret more than anything, though there's a letting go of illusions. The games nominated this year were all exceptional, but honestly, I still can't figure out what the criteria was for Game of the Year. I feel like I came all the way here for nothing, and that's crazy. And the CEO mentions how he has seen a lot of strong dissatisfaction and frustration in players' comments, which he says were expressed humorously or ironically. We've seen it transpire with a review bombing of Baldur's Gate 3 on Steam, and that actually is indeed something that has happened. And this is all because of these remarks coming from Larry and boss Sven Vincke. It got mistranslated, or I guess the sentiment, just Chinese audience didn't understand it, but it was actually a powerful moment in which Sven Vincke really called out the AAA gaming industry, a lot of publisher greed. And Sven Vincke pretty much said this: the Oracle told me that the Game of the Year 2025 next year is going to be made by a studio who found the formula to make it up here on stage. It's stupidly simple, but somehow it keeps on getting lost. The studio makes a game because they want to make a game they want to play themselves. They created it because it hadn't been created before. They didn't make it to increase the market share. They didn't make it to serve the brand. They didn't have to meet arbitrary sales targets or fear they'd be laid off if they didn't meet those targets. Again, a very powerful moment against the AAA games and gaming industry, and this is something that Sven Vincke has been voicing for the last year or so, since Baldur's Gate 3 became kind of like the new standard, which is really an old standard. But yeah, the Chinese audience, very much the sentiment, just maybe it was mistranslation or something, but yeah, there was a review bombing on Baldur's Gate 3's Steam page by Chinese players, and as it's explained here, for many Chinese users, Vincke's pre-award speech, which emphasized creating games not just for profit, was seen as hypocritical, almost as if it was directed at Black Myth Wukong. This backlash, however, appears to stem from a poor translation of Vincke's speech, which led to misunderstandings. The tone and sarcasm in his comments were lost in translation, causing confusion among viewers, thus the review bombing. Although some have suggested that the negative reviews from Chinese users were due to a poor translation of Vincke's words, which failed to convey the sarcasm in his remarks, the situation remains noteworthy. And again, the other remarks that he said in this pre-award speech to Game of the Year, in which Vincke was given a little bit longer because last year, again, that infamous "please wrap it up," I guess Keighley wanted to make it up to him. But furthermore, the people in charge forbade them from cramming the game with anything whose only purpose was to increase revenue and didn't serve the game design. They didn't treat their developers like numbers on a spreadsheet. They didn't treat their players as users to exploit, and they didn't make decisions they knew were short-sighted in function of a bonus or politics. They knew that if you put the game and the team first, the revenue will follow. They were driven by idealism and wanted players to have fun, and they realized that if developers don't have fun, nobody was going to have any fun. They understood the value of respect, that if they treat their developers and players well, the same developers and players would forgive them when things don't go as planned, but above all, they cared about their games because they love games. It's really that simple. This was a powerful moment, a powerful speech against a lot of the greed that's happening within this industry, and really making an observation that, yeah, 2025 isn't going to have some, AAA slop up there as Game of the Year nominee. It's going to be a team, a passionate team that gets nominated, which I very much agree with. But unfortunately, obviously, I think some of this got lost in translation, and some took it as a direct shot at Black Myth Wukong, and I guess I could somewhat understand that. But getting back to the CEO's remarks, again, he had a lot more to say. He said, "I completely understand these feelings and share the frustration, because behind these emotions lies not pain or malice, but dignity and confidence. When you're so confident and yet don't receive the recognition you expected, it's natural to feel upset. Personally, I'm even more confident than most of you, as you can see from my first ever answer on Zihu. In fact, I wrote my Game of the Year acceptance speech 2 years ago only to never get the chance to deliver it. During the development of this game, many of my colleagues weren't as optimistic as I was. Having tested so many interim builds, they couldn't help but focus on the game's flaws and doubt whether we could meet the deadlines. One of my main roles in the company was reassuring everyone we're doing great and the product is improving. Because here's the thing, you can't be confident when you've already won. That's not confidence, that's parroting results. Sure, we lost today, we might lose again tomorrow, so what? There are countless factors that influence outcomes, and results are always uncertain. What we can control is choosing what we do, tackling real challenges, doing hard things, pursuing what we believe in when you're doing these things, and you should absolutely have confidence." And the big thing a lot of people are talking about is this specific part of his remarks, because he has more. We're going to get into that in a second, but he says, I still can't figure out what the criteria was for Game of the Year. And that's something that is up for debate, but it is worth mentioning what happened pre-launch to Black Myth Wukong. Even it being nominated was something that was seen controversial in the eyes of some in games media. These were some of the headlines. If Black Myth Wukong isn't nominated for Game of the Year, fans are going to be insufferable. And then they pointed out that some of the media outlets didn't even nominate it, such as Polygon recently updated its Game of the Year frontrunners list, while the Golden Joystick Awards also announced its 6 nominees for this year's PC and console Game of the Year categories. Black Myth Wukong is nowhere to be seen outside of smaller categories. And then it pointed out that some people have said that it's being rigged against the Black Myth Wukong team. We saw Polygon. Black Myth Wukong is one of the lowest rated Game of the Year nominees in Game Awards history, and this was a headline that we saw from a number of outlets pointing out that once it was nominated, a lot of these outlets saying that it didn't make any sense. Again, Game Rant, Black Myth Wukong's Game of the Year nomination sticks out like a sore thumb. Screen Rant, or The Gamer, saying Black Myth Wukong's Game of the Year nomination proves it's gaming's Barbie. And then Screen Rant, again, this is what I mean about the hate campaign that has happened with Black Myth Wukong. Some of it makes no sense, because if you're going to bring up open critic review scores, these were some of the actual reviews that contributed to this game being the lowest rated game. And this was Screen Rant's review. They gave it a 6 out of 10, and one of their big cons of the game was lacking in inclusivity and diversity. That was the reason why they gave the game a 6 out of 10, and that very much calls into question a lot of the reviews that are, submitted to open critic. And that's why I said that the review process is very much, there's so many problems with it, and that's why when you have headlines like this, it doesn't show the whole story. And that's why, again, Black Myth Wukong did end up actually winning at the Golden Joysticks. It won 2024 Game of the Year. So maybe the team really did think that this was going to be a continuation that happened across, So I don't exactly understand the mockery of these developers that are happening right now because they're upset or we're crying, because they definitely are very, very much passionate. And then this is the voting jury. This is something I talked about beforehand, but some of this also, again, it does call into question, what is this criteria? Why are some of these individuals even having a voice in this? I want to see more gaming, YouTubers, actual content creators have a say in this, rather than fucking Entertainment Weekly, who barely has any role in the video game industry. Then some of these other outlets, like, you can have your problems with some of these outlets because of some of their coverage, but some of these aren't even, they barely talk about video games. LA Times, Rolling Stone, NPR, Variety, The Atlantic, and specifically Variety. Let's look at some of their gaming coverage recently. They talked about their top 10 video game leaders. Who you're thinking about that? Just put some images in your head. Maybe the Hauser brothers, Todd Howard, I don't know. just actual video game people. Gabe Newell, Sven Vincke. These are the people they came up with. We have first a Lucasfilm executive. These are supposed to be the top 10 entertainment gaming leaders. Lucasfilm executive starts this off. Next one, Matt Booty, who has run Xbox into the ground, is their second pick. Third one, Neil Druckmann. At least it's a game developer, I suppose, although, again, Neil. Third one, we have a video game streamer who opened an indie studio like 2 months ago. Sure, that makes sense. We couldn't go with Donkey, who's had a, indie publisher that created one of the best indie games of the year with, was it Animal Well? Sure, whatever. Next one, we have Hideo Kojima, again, actual developer that probably does deserve here. One of the only one that actually makes sense. Christian Link, head of animation studio Riot Games. And then we have an executive producer at Blizzard. We have an EA executive. We have a chief revenue officer at Scopely. And then we have an executive at Disney. That is your list of the top 10 entertainment gaming leaders. What a shit list. And again, this is like an entire team at Variety that came up with this. And these are the same individuals that have a say in who wins Game of the Year. And I just find that absolutely insane. And that goes back to the point of why are these individuals having a say in Game of the Year, and why do they have so much of a say? And that is my problem with this. Again, Guardian, Metro, The Mirror, some of these outlets, there's just no reason why they should have a say, in my opinion. And that's why I think criticism of the Game Awards in this regard is very, very much valid. But getting back to the Black Myth Wukong CEO's remarks, he does continue. He talks about how their success is not a fluke, but the inevitable outcome of Chinese culture, talent, and business environment. Feng Ji thinks this is but the start, as more Chinese studios will bring high quality and engaging Chinese stories to the world. And we've actually kind of already seen that just this month alone. Obviously, it's not a single-player, story-driven, high-quality. It's still a free-to-play game, but it is very much a game that has caught on. And what I'm talking about is Marvel's Rivals, which has very much taken the hero shooter by the balls in some regards. I mean, 500,000 players at launch. That is a huge achievement, and it does some great things that I think we're not seeing from other, Western studios. And it's bringing true competition to Overwatch, which I think at this point may be badly needed, especially with some of the recent content updates and really just the nature of Overwatch 2, which has disappointed gamers in a variety of ways. Evidence of that is just look at the Steam reviews, even the current ones. But yes, Marvel Rivals comes from NetEase, and that was a massive success story. Another Chinese studio, another Chinese success story, and hopefully we'll see more of that in the future. More high-quality experiences from markets that haven't typically done that, that's encouraging, and I want to see that. Whether that be China, whether that be India, whether it be wherever. But the CEO goes on to say that some have said that a team with no prior experience in single-player games achieving such success on their first attempt is rare, unrepeatable fluke. I'd like to say this was no fluke. It's the inevitable outcome of Chinese culture, talent, China's business environment, China's gaming industry, and gamers worldwide coming together. If we hadn't recognized this inevitability early on, we wouldn't have been so determined to make this choice. This wasn't a gamble, it was following the tide of history. Game Science is fortunate to have participated and witnessed the beginning of this tide. I believe many more peers will in the future bring high quality, more engaging, and more content. And that is music to my ears. More good games for everybody. I don't see why anybody wouldn't want that. And then he did end his rant on a good note, as it mentions here. Feng Ji acknowledges how the studio's ability to make and play games already makes them fortunate. In truth, just being able to make and play games already makes us incredibly fortunate. In this world, many people have never even had the chance to play so-called AAA games, never used a console or computer, and feel lost, pained, or even despairing in the face of their circumstances. Many are suffering from hardship and injustice. Precisely because of this, we must strive to create better games, ones that bring truth, goodness, and beauty to more people. I've always believed that the greatest value of good games lies in making happiness for more evenly distributed in this world. The road ahead is long, the winds is still fierce, the demons still arrogant, but we are always growing stronger. And he closes by saying he hopes the story of Black Myth Wukong can give some courage to those who are feeling lost and perhaps shed a bit of light for those still groping in the darkness. Then with a calm heart, we can all keep moving forward, which is a great way to end this. And I understand the frustration and again, how passionate they are about this. And I think that's what this really is. It's passion. And I just don't understand the mockery that some people have been giving to some of these remarks and taking some of this out of context. And again, this sentiment that this event was, rigged against Black Myth Wukong, we've seen this from some popular streamers. Shroud is actually one of the most notable ones. He put out a tweet a while ago saying rigged, and he doubled down on this just the other day when Astro Bot took home the honor, saying again it was rigged. And we have seen some people saying that the translation that again has has been now going viral is not entirely accurate. As one Chinese user said, "I will not let this Wukong slander go unaddressed." Within this, they mention that part of it where it may have gotten mistranslated, or the sentiment's different. They say the part of the article that mentions, "I wrote the acceptance speech 2 years ago, with context read more like he's thanking players for the confidence and making a joke that I had even more confidence than you guys, cuz look, I wrote a speech that I didn't even get to use." He used those exact emojis, so it reads more like a lighthearted joke. At the end, he wrapped up again talking about the philosophy behind Black Myth Wukong and hopes that it influenced people in a positive way, which again I just brought up a second ago. So look, I do think that a lot of people need to understand that there are definitely some developers, some individuals that go to these events and they are passionate, they're hoping for, a victory. And I understand that a lot of people, maybe including myself, don't really care about the winners and losers and such, but again, there are people, and I do think that you see that online to an extent, in which people very much have opinions about who's going to take home certain honors. I mean, there's a reason why there was such outrage and uproar with even Elden Ring being nominated, because it was a DLC. So regardless, I've said this a couple of times now, but I don't think that there was a clear frontrunner of who is going to take home honors of Game of the Year. Obviously, Astro Bot ended up winning those honors, but you could have made a case for almost all of these games, and some of the other ones that weren't even nominated. There wasn't a clear frontrunner. So Astro Bot winning, I don't think that there's a huge scandal with that, but I do think that the CEO does raise some valid points about the criteria and those contributing to the jury of the Game Awards. That's something that we probably should be talking a little bit more about, because again, some of these individuals just have no right to be voicing any opinions about, Game Awards when they probably barely have played any of the games that were even nominated. I think that's my issue and that's my critique overall. But anyway, what do you make of Black Myth Wukong, the developer's reaction to losing out on Game of the Year? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, or if you found any informative value. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.